Welcome to Vibrational Revelations. Today's guest, we're having her back, Dr. Joanna Kuyava, author of The Other Goddess, scholar, and spiritual detective. Welcome back.
I'm glad to be back, Elena and Alejandro.
And today's episode is called The Tantra Mystery. So I've been looking forward to this episode because I want to hear about the historical background. Of course, Alejandro and I prepared the vibrational frequencies for those of you that are brand new to our channel. Welcome. Of course, you're welcome to also explore. We have over a library of 130 recordings. We go live every single Tuesday in the Vibrational Revelations membership community. And then, of course, we're grateful that you are here on YouTube with us. One of the questions you guys might have, if you're brand new, how is it that you and Alejandro and I are doing this work? So Alejandro and I created the system by using scalar wave technology to tap into the biofield, which is the field of information. And the scalar wave technology is basically where you were able to tap into the past information, the present information. Of course, we try never to tap into the future because there's many outcomes, many possibilities, but the biofield is a record keeper of all that is. So we're excited to have you back here, Joanna, and let's dive into the mysteries of Tantra.
Absolutely. That's my great passion too. So let's go for it.
So the first person, of course, Dr. Joanna provided a list for us of different historical figures. Some of them are mystical figures, I guess, and also the different systems of Tantra. There's a couple of systems that we've tested. Now, for each of the people or beings, there's over 30 different categories that we measure.
Wow.
All right. The first one is Arda Triambaka.
Yes, Ardha-Tryambaka. I personally really love her, so I wonder what will come up, because she's this kind of mysterious, mythical figure from which possibly all Tantra sprang in the, dawn of the ages, so to speak. So according to the Tantric teachings, she was the daughter of one of the first three original great beings that were actually connected with Shiva. And Shiva in esoteric Hinduism basically means divine consciousness. So they came out basically out of divine consciousness, and one of these three sages was Triambaka. His name was Triambaka, and each of the sages represented a different type of philosophy. And Triambaka came to earth to represent the non-dualistic philosophy. So basically saying consciousness is everything. So it is considered the most evolved form of philosophy. And he had two children, a daughter and a son. And the daughter was called Arda Triambaka, which means half Triambaka. So it means, because it's like one half of him, right? Because there was the other half. And she is a very mysterious figure because she actually started Tantric teachings. So Tantra, according to this tradition, comes from her, including the most kind of scandalous and also most mysterious form of Tantra, which is, I will discuss later, Kula Ritual, and also the use of sexuality for the expansion of consciousness, to get in touch with divine consciousness and the actual moment of original creation. Arda Triambaka. I can't wait.
All right, I'll be the one to break the news. Hopefully, good news. Let's see. So the scale is from 0 to 1,000. The 1,000 is a fully integrated being experience, right? And we talk about how the frequencies below 200 are the frequencies of victimization, right? The 200 is the first frequency of what we call the bridge that makes a being recognize that everything is connected. So in her case, her overall frequency was 250. And this is the frequency of observation, a frequency, a neutral point. Now, when she incarnated, her frequency was 250. And at birth, her frequency was also 250. So again, this observation neutrality. Health, she viewed through the lens of 250. Finances, 55. 55 is something that we would call manipulation frequency. Creativity, 50. So again, she used her creative energy to manipulate. Relationships, 55. Again, this, it's interesting. We've talked about the goddesses, right? In the past episodes, some of them are high vibrational frequencies, the true divine goddesses, and then there's the toxic feminine kind of energy. So this relationship 55 is what we would call the toxic feminine. Personal growth for her was 250, very neutral. Philanthropy, how she shared, that was also 55. So she shared through the lens of manipulation. Intuition, 250, neutral. Under the aspect of intuition, there's 4 aspects. Clairaudience, 310, which is willingness, eagerness. Clairsentience, 125. So there's addictive tendencies in how she perceived, right? Clairsentience is receiving messages through your own physical senses. Clairvoyance, 250, and claircognizance, 250. Now, we also looked at 4 aspects of intelligence. IQ, 250. EQ, emotional intelligence, 50. So very disconnected. SQ, social quotient. And you probably will guess it. If you were to guess it, what do you think it is?
No, I am afraid to guess.
So here's the key. She had the magnetic presence, and it's the 500. So she was able to lure, people in with her magnetism, the 500 charisma, you can say, right? And then the 55 frequency in relationships and philanthropy. AQ, when she was facing challenging situations, that was a frequency of 50 for AQ, adversity quotient. Again, disconnect, disassociate. How much did she enjoy playing her role? 85%, because we're all playing our role in this reality, right? She was in her ego 100%, and out of that, 100% superior. She had very narcissistic tendencies with the low frequency relationships. In the now, how present she was, 90%. Integrity, 82%. And out of that, integrity to herself, 100%. Integrity to others, 62%. So oftentimes you'll see these narcissistic tendencies of low integrity to others, low frequency in relationships, right? Low EQ. So you could, and then low compassion and high superior ego. But we'll go into compassion in a moment. Self-awareness, 96%. So she was pretty aware of what she was doing. Clarity, 90%. Alignment with divine purpose, 89%. So she was out of alignment. Alignment with personal purpose, 100%. Compassion, 76%. Empathy, 86%.
Very interesting. So very interesting, although I must say I'm a little bit disappointed. I thought, that she would be a little bit, had a little bit higher vibration, than that. And it kind of, makes me rethink certain things, certainly, right? So interesting.
I think those frequencies are a great way to reflect on our own belief systems and perhaps also take a step back and just reevaluate things, right? It's always nice to get another lens of how we are perceiving our reality. And this is just one of those lenses that we're able to use.
Yes. And the frequencies, we cannot base our, it skipped my mind, but, to judge or analyze or assess a person's achievements and contribution to humanity based on frequencies, I feel that doesn't serve justice, So it is, the experience was perfect the way it was, and it was perfect in order for her to contribute what she contributed. She contributed, right?
I also think because I believe that we receive, messages from divine consciousness, like a radio station, right? So it depends. Sometimes you're also enculturated to your times and your culture. So if we even go really back deep into the past, you know, women didn't have much to say. So maybe this was her kind of way of assuming, you know, hegemony, as assuming power, you know, through sexual rituals, you know, because this is what she introduced there. So we don't know, but it's very interesting. I just have to process it, right? Because I wrote about her in my book, and you know, and I was happy to discover her. You know, I wanted to give her credit. So so it's really interesting information for me, but I still have to process it basically.
Of course, and maybe it will give you some more insight, right?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for that.
Yes. The next one is dakinis. So what we did, because you wrote dakinis, we decided, because we didn't have anything specific, right? So what we've done is we've measured the collective consciousness of dakinis. So keep in mind, of course, there are beings, dakinis that were high frequencies and those that are low frequencies, just like Alejandro and I have measured vibrational frequencies of the human collective through the ages, right? So now we're looking into the dakinis, human collective consciousness.
So dakinis, and I absolutely agree with you, it can be a very mixed bag, because, you know, dakinis were evolved beings, and sometimes women, very often portrayed as fierce-looking shaktis or energies, both in esoteric Hinduism, but also in Tibetan Buddhism. And they had the ability to move different dimensions, and they could be good, they could be bad. You know, but there was a path of a dakini. So like with every path, you know, you can commit to the good side or the shadow side of this part. So there are some great dakinis that receive enlightenment, and we discuss them later, but there are some dakinis that people were actually scared of them. Okay, so there are all kinds of mantras to protect yourself from a dakini. Yet at the same time, there are the wise women or the wise beings, depending, I guess, on which part of the dakini path you were walking. So I'm very curious about that.
So the collective consciousness of dakinis is 125, which is this addictive frequency, right? So if you think of addiction frequency, this is the frequency. Unfulfilled desire, constantly searching and wanting. It's like this energy that is wanting more. It's unfulfilled. Health overall, again, we're looking at the collective consciousness of the group. Health 125, again, unfulfilled desire. Finances 55, which is that manipulative energy. Creativity 125, again, creating with this feeling of void. Never enough, right? Relationships 55. Personal growth 200. Philanthropy 55. Intuition 200. Under intuition, clairaudience, 200. Clairsentience, 125. Clairvoyance, 200. Claircognizance, 200. IQ for the collective, 200. EQ, 50. So the pattern that is emerging, right? SQ, which is the social, the magnetism is 400. That's the highest number. Again, this magnetic pole. And the AQ is 50. How much collectively they enjoy their role? 100%. In the ego, 100%. And out of that, 100% superior ego. In the now, 100%. So fully present for the experience. Integrity overall, 56%. Integrity to themselves, 100%. Integrity to others, 50%. Self-awareness, 96%, so very aware. Clarity, 100%. Usually it's a mastery. You know, when you see those high frequencies of self-awareness and clarity, it tells you somebody is mastering. Alignment with divine purpose. The alignment of these dakinis is 58%, so completely out of alignment. Alignment with personal purpose, their agenda collectively, 100%. Compassion, 89%, and empathy, 94%.
It actually doesn't surprise me, because, as I said, they are a mixed bag, and people were afraid of them sometimes. And I am also kind of looking at what was going on socioeconomically at the time. And sometimes, you know, maybe they were angry women with what was going on, you know, and they just wanted to receive some or create some autonomy, you know, some kind of sense of power in a society in which they were disempowered. And they had the path of kind of shamanic path or the path of magic. And this kind of power can be used, as I said, for good or bad, just to, you know, feel empowered personally on an ego level or to do good, you know. And I'm pretty sure that some of them probably did it for the sake of self-empowerment, rather self like a small s, not the capital S, self-empowerment, to empower themselves on the ego level, right? This is what the readings, I guess, would suggest.
Definitely. Yes. And I think based on the numbers, it seems like most of them, without a doubt, were playing that role, you know, within the 125 and the 50. Frequencies. Yes.
But you know, you said it's interesting what was going on at that time. We looked with Alejandro into collective consciousness through history when there was wars happening, including where we are collectively as humanity today. And actually, collectively, we're at 125. The frequency of this unfulfilled desire, this addiction for more. And anytime we looked at wars, which we've posted these episodes on YouTube and in our community, the frequencies of different wars and revolutions of the human collective was 125. So that also reflects something that you shared, that perhaps this is the group of women that wanted to create a massive change.
That's right. And this is what I think. So that's very good. 125. Thank you for reminding this unfulfilled desire, you know, feeling that something is inherently wrong. They could feel it, you know, but perhaps they went, you know, about it in a wrong way. You know what I mean? But they definitely sought empowerment. And I think my intuition is telling me they wanted to change society probably. Maybe rather than evolving spiritually, and they did use magic in various ways, good and bad. So that's what.
Yes, and one is experiencing that frequency is almost impossible to come up with the right solutions, you know, and almost impossible to be divinely creative at 125 and expecting the world to change. And when we say unfulfilled desire, I think we all have unfulfilled desires. It doesn't make us good or bad, right? And it's more the unfulfilled desire, but with resistance, with focusing on that which hasn't been manifested or materialized, more than focusing on what we desire to experience with higher frequency, you know? So they were stuck there, and that's what they came up with in order to cope with what was happening, like you said.
So it's actually a good lesson for all of us, you know, because as you said, we have unfulfilled desires, you know, so just persistent and power games is not the only way to fulfill the desire, right?
Yes, because it expands that which they wanted to transmute.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm not surprised by that, yes. So I'm not surprised by the results.
All right, the next being on the list that you've sent to us is Niguma.
Yes, Niguma. So she's a very interesting person because, and she lived around the 11th century. And because I have to check some Tibetan vocabulary, and she's considered a founder of Vajrayana Buddhism, which is a form of Tibetan Buddhism. And she's an interesting person because she was one of the Dakinis. So, you know, now we are differentiating the Dakinis. And she was considered to be an enlightened being. And she started the most secret or most hidden path of Buddhism. And it's very difficult to learn anything about it unless you go through many stages of initiation, even now, because this tradition is still well and alive in Tibetan Buddhism, you know, which is very, in many ways, enigmatic form of Buddhism, which is closely connected with shamanism and so on, right? So with many rituals and so on. So this includes many secret rituals as well. And from her story in some way, although it is also mythological, is such that she was a princess and she got disillusioned with, you know, material goods and, you know, all the beautiful cars. I'm joking because it's 11th century, but, you know, like just a good life. And she started to seek the path of enlightenment. and eventually, started this new tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, which is very secretive.
So let's find out. Do you want to reveal those frequencies?
Sure. Niguma.
Alejandro looks scared.
You guys are gonna know the secret of the secret.
Yeah, exactly.
Not gonna be so secret in a moment.
I know. Victoria's Secret is gonna run away from us. The overall frequency of Niguma is 125. Yes. Frequency in utero or incarnated at the frequency of 125 and was born at the frequency of 125. So very consistent, right? Which is somewhat unusual. Viewed health through the frequency of 125. Finances, 55. Creativity, 125. Relationships, 50. Personal growth, 125. Philanthropy, 55. Intuition, 125. Now, so we have mentioned during the previous episodes that when it comes to intuition, especially, has nothing to do with how intuitive the person is, but what filter gets activated when the information is coming through, right? Under intuition, or with an intuition, we have clairaudience at 125, clairsentience, 125, clairvoyance, 125, and claircognizance at 125. Now, under the intelligence aspect, she has IQ 175, which is the pride, right?
She cared what other people thought of.
Okay.
EQ, the emotional quotient, which we feel is the most powerful weapon of all out of the four. EQ was 50, so emotional disconnected. SQ, the social quotient, it's like rock star style, 500.
Yeah.
It was very magnetic, right?
There you go.
Was able to seduce the masses with her presence. AQ, the adversity quotient, 50 as well, emotional disconnected when faced with challenges, right? Indie joy, 100%. So she was having a blast playing her role. In the ego, 100%. And 100% of that was the superior version of the ego.
She was a princess.
Yes.
Through and through, yeah.
In the now, 100%, so she was fully present. Integrity, how loyal she was to her core values and beliefs, right? To her truth, 97%. Yes. Integrity to self, 100%. Integrity to others, 97% as well. So she walked her talk, right? She meant what she said. And it was all within the 125 most of the time, in the 50s. Self-awareness, 100%. Clarity, 100%.
She's a master.
Alignment with divine purpose, 100%. Alignment with personal purpose, 100%. So far, this, along with the, the overall frequency, 125, the 15 relationships, enjoying her role 100%, 100% in the ego and 100% in the superior ego, and meaning what she was sharing and saying, being full in her clarity at 100%, full in her awareness. She was a master of that frequency, She came to play that role and she owned it fully. Yes, so she mastered it.
You know, as I said, in the past, we used to call people below 200 who incarnated low frequency, we used to say shadow players, but actually we've changed that narrative and we're saying these are the great awakeners. And she definitely played her role as a great awakener. She's mastered it fully.
You know, so bringing contrast, right? No, and those that are able to recognize it, they had the choice to rather transcend it or remain there if it was, they were comfortable with it, right? Compassion, 80%. So she, without a doubt, like you said, like Princess you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
She felt and had narcissistic tendencies for sure. Empathy, 89%.
Yeah.
Then that's all we read because she's below 1.
I don't think I'm terribly surprised, although of course I you know, because I love these people, so I hoped for higher frequency. But you know, she was a princess and she had unfulfilled desires because. But to give her credit, you know, she had everything, and she left it to seek something else. But it did spring from unfulfilled desires. So, for example, it's just not enough to be princess. It's just not enough to have pretty things. So she turned into spirituality. Right, but maybe some of this ego traits, you know, followed as well, right? So she still felt superior, and you know, and she had the magnetic kind of vibration of a princess, right? Even when she was a what we would call nowadays nun, or you know, then a dakini. So she was probably very charismatic and so on. But I would agree that originally it did spring from unfulfilled desire. Right, but to give her credit, she moved from the material to spiritual. Right, probably the best way she knew, and the only way she knew how.
Yes, and she had.
It is very possible too, if it was coming to me, which is fine, not with the intention of judging her experience, but to where it was not obviously enough what she was experiencing when it comes to the material world, and needed to be fed. Getting involved in the spiritual world needed to be fed by with other people's energies, you know.
That's quite possible. Yeah, it's quite possible because yes, as I said, dakinis are a mixed bag. You know, as I said, maybe some people will be upset, but there are all kinds of mantras in Hinduism and Tibetan Buddhism. You know, to call upon dakinis, but also to defend against them. You know, they're just this wild, almost shamanic energies which can go in either direction.
Right. People go with them when they think they need them, and it's going to help them. Then
that's right.
They realize that they can do it by themselves. Then they run away from them. Huh? That's what happens.
That's true.
Okay, the next one is Sukha Siddhi.
So she is actually kind of usually coupled with Niguma, except that her story is a little bit different because she is also one of the founders of the same form of Buddhism as Niguma. However, her story is different because she was not born a princess, she was born to great poverty. And in fact, she was expelled from her family because she shared the last food, according to the story, that she had, you know, with somebody who is even more poor than she, you know, the beggar. And the family expelled her because they said, what are you doing, basically? We don't have enough and you share what you don't have. And she apparently consciously after that started to seek the path of enlightenment, you know, and she actually originally comes from Kashmir, which is, we discussed it later, fascinating place for Tantra. And she started to walk towards what she called the valley of the Dakinis, you know, and looking for some wisdom, looking for enlightenment that she heard was available for women, because as you have to understand, nobody wanted to teach women anything at that stage, you know, so she had to seek other women that could teach her, you know, the path to enlightenment. But she also met a male guru who is called you know, Siddha gurus, so which basically means somebody who has great powers and also spiritual powers. And she apparently reached enlightenment very quickly and continued. So she's one of the major dakinis of this tradition of Tibetan Buddhism together with Niguma, and lived approximately about the same time.
Before we share, I want to say one thing that I think is very important just as a reminder for everyone who is watching. The term enlightenment, this is why we actually took that out of our frequency scale. What we recognized is people or beings who are born, let's say, at 50 frequency, or who are born at 100 frequency, and then throughout their life, they go through what we call the hero's journey, and let's say they're in the 200 or 250. Many times throughout the readings that we've done one-on-one with people, they'll say at 250, I feel enlightened. And we recognize that absolutely, to go from a frequency of 50 or 100 into 200 and above is the frequency of where a person will experience enlightenment, because it's a tremendous amount of work. It takes so much work to overcome those lower frequencies, and it's a lot more than those that are born at a higher frequencies, because it's sort of like a given known information versus having to overcome many adversities, a lot of challenges through life.
It's like a rebirth. And yes, it might feel like enlightenment.
It might feel.
Although technically it's not, you know?
So I just want to say what I learned from my studies and from, spending over a decade with a spiritual teacher about enlightenment, that there are enlightenments. So it means, there's never like final enlightenment, so to speak, as long as you're in this 3 dimensions. So there's always a place to grow, right? So perhaps a better term would be experience expansion of consciousness, and was able to stay in this expanded state of consciousness, but it doesn't have to be the final state of consciousness, or, the 100% that were maybe few avatars only had, right? Because they actually came from a different place, right, to teach us, and it is available for us, but it is not. Some people believe that it's like a final journey, now I'm enlightened, but no, there's another, it's like a staircase.
That's right.
It's like a staircase, so there are enlightenments, and it's a continuous journey.
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad that we kind of set that tone. It's very important to not lose it, use it loosely, the terminology.
Yes. And throughout life, throughout the day, even, we can have glimpses of what that feels like, at any given moment, and no matter what frequency or overall frequency one is, the person is experiencing, right? Now, when it comes to Sukhasiddhi, did I say it correctly?
No, I just have to see the spelling now, because Sukhasiddhi.
Sukhasiddhi. Yes. So it matches in a way what you shared about her, the courageous attitude, right, for searching for more, exploring for more, and wanting to explore in a way to what she was already familiar with, which is her incarnation frequency. You'll see. Her overall frequency was 200, which is, courageous, heroic attitude. Her frequency in utero was 200 as well, and at birth, 50. So this is also a pretty good example of the hero's journey that Elena was addressing earlier. When it comes to health, it was 200. Finances, 100. Creativity, 200. Relationships, 200. Personal growth, 350. Philanthropy, 200. Intuition, 350. Then within intuition, we have clairaudience, 350. Clairsentience, 200. Clairvoyance, 400. And claircognizance, 350.
Very different frequency, right, than the other one.
Yes. So, this is very clear that she was definitely determined to go back to her home base in a way, the frequency in which she incarnated at, right, which was the 200. Now, under IQ, she has 200. EQ, emotional quotient, 350. SQ, 100, and AQ, 100.
Interesting. So how different, because lower SQ, because, you know, she didn't have a princess complex, so to speak. So she didn't think about charisma. She was more about courage and right. And her journey rather than, you know, having influence, right? Over others.
Yes.
And she, you know, for her, this is, I would say she actually represents a very beautiful example of what being human is like. Being born at 50, stepping into that courage, you know, being a hero, your own, you know, hero's journey, and then trusting the divine intelligence, which is the emotional quotient at 350. It's beautiful. Like this is a beautiful journey of a beautiful being.
Yes, I know. And in my eyes, in my mind's eye, I actually see her, you know, barefoot, this poor woman, barefoot, going, you know, through the mountains of Kashmir, you know, seeking someone to teach her, you know, some truth about life. It is a very heroic journey.
Yes, definitely. In the joy, 94%. In the ego, 96%. And 94% of that was the inferior version of the ego. In the now, 95%. Integrity, 100%. Integrity to self, 100%. And integrity to others, 100% as well.
Yes. She gave away, you know, what she didn't have, basically, right? Like the last morsel of food to someone else. So I would say show some integrity to others, no?
Yes.
Beautiful. She was true to herself and true to others the same way, right? Self-awareness, 98%. Clarity, 100%. Now, aligning with divine purpose, 100%. In aligning with personal purpose, 100% as well. She has this beautiful sense of fulfillment, obviously, no? Compassion, 100%. Empathy, 100%.
Because she comes from poverty, you see, so it puts her in a different, she understands suffering, right? So I guess it also increases your compassion if you have an understanding of suffering, right? From your own experience and from observation. So I'm actually very happy with these numbers because she is, and I really like what both of you said, that she was a heroic figure, and, you know, imagine her journey. Actually, it makes a good novel, you know, like
totally. Maybe that's the new book.
Maybe, you know, next project.
Yes, to just inspire humanity, to recognize, you know, she rose, you could say, from this 50 frequency. That's why I said right before we revealed her numbers that we see this often with people being born at 100 or 50 frequency. And it's just, you know, it's also recognizing that I would say most human beings go through suffering in life. And it takes so much to overcome that. So it's about having the compassion for each other and also for our own journey.
And I think she basically shows us how to overcome our limitations as well. So it's not about, I'm just not fulfilled yet, you know, like a princess, but rather, you know, overcome limitation on every possible level, you know, poverty, no education, just having this desire, you know, there must be more, you know, and personal growth. Yeah, beautiful. I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, she was fully committed to personal growth. That was one of her highest numbers too.
That's right.
350. You know, that's really
that was her
guiding light, like Elena often says.
Yes. Okay.
Am I your guiding light?
You are one of my guiding lights.
Wonderful.
You're gonna make me blush. Okay, the next one is, let's see how to pronounce it. Abhinavagupta.
Perfect. Abhinavagupta. So Abhinavagupta is a 10th century philosopher, so he predates the two Dakinis. He is from Kashmir. He was born a Brahmin, so it means to the highest caste in an Indian system. And he was born to the family of philosophers, very privileged, but also unbelievably bright. If you read his philosophy, and doesn't matter how many degrees you have in philosophy, you know that it's a supreme philosophy. His mind was amazing. His mind was amazing. And he also invited women to his court, because he had a court, his own court. He invited women who could also study mathematics and philosophy and so on. He had many students who later wrote many works. He wrote the work called The Light on Tantras, or Tantra Loka, where he explains all forms of Tantra, not only sexual. There's only one part of Tantra that is sexual. And he was a very controversial figure simply because he was criticized by his contemporaries because he was going into conversation with the Buddhists, with whoever wanted to, explore everything spiritual, intellectually, he was willing to talk to them, and also invited women. And if he thought that a woman had a potential, he says he didn't care. And also, but I'll discuss it later, he also practiced sexual tantra, right? So Abhinavagupta, the way I see him, a very colorful, and unbelievably bright person. So I just wonder, I'm exposing myself because obviously the numbers may or may not support this. And it's quite interesting, when I was writing another book that is still not published, and perhaps I'll finish it, he has certainly some abilities that are like supernatural, because I actually had a feeling that he was like walking next to me when I was studying his work. I could like see him in a immaterial form, but enough to recognize him. Do you know what I mean? It is
yes,
just
of
like
course.
in an astral body. I'm not sure, because I'm not familiar much with this terminology, but he was there, and he was, very courteous, very charming, like he actually had a personality, and he was very flattered, that I studied his philosophy. So this is just a little bit of self-exposure. And I must say, I was quite charmed, so because with sophisticated, charming man. So this is how he presented himself to me.
He's going to be very happy with what we're about to reveal.
I'm sure he's dancing right now.
Yes.
And you will be too.
Oh, thank you.
His overall frequency, 500. I apologize. 500. He reincarnated at the frequency of 500 as well. That is the frequency of flow, right? Low frequency. He was born at the frequency of 250. He viewed health to the lens of flow or love at 500. Finances, 350. Creativity, 540. That is the bliss state.
He was very prolific. He wrote and wrote and wrote, on anything.
Oh, yes, he was experiencing bliss. Relationships. You want to take a guess?
No. A bit lower.
500.
Oh, 500. Okay, that's good.
Personal growth, 700.
Wow. Yeah.
Philanthropy, 540, which is also bliss, right? Intuition, 500. And within intuition, we have clairaudience, clairsentience, clairvoyance, and claircognizance at 500. IQ, 400.
I just have to say, this is actually a very rare IQ frequency. Einstein had 499. Average for most humans that we read is between 200 and 250. So absolutely, it actually solidifies what you shared, that he was extremely intelligent person, right? So that,
amazing mind. Yes, amazing mind.
EQ, 500. SQ, 400. So he was also
charming. I thought it was good.
You described it well, yes. AQ, the adversity quotient, 200, you know? So he was courageous, heroic attitude towards challenges. Indie joy, 96%. In the ego, 70%. And 56% of that was the inferior version of the ego, so somewhat balanced, and also was really relying a lot more on his emotional intelligence, right?
That's why he was able to bring different backgrounds of people, women, into all these conversations. Because
yes, and trusting his intuition too. Right? In the now, 98%. Integrity, 100%. I'm a little disappointed here, but you know, it is what it is. Integrity to self, 100%. And integrity to others, 100% as well.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Right?
Wonderful.
Now, self-awareness, 100%. Clarity, 100%. Alignment with divine purpose, 100%. Alignment with personal purpose, 100%. Compassion, 100%. And empathy, 100% as well.
He was a master of 500 frequency.
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. And you know, he as an intellectual, he was absolutely amazing. But they say that he walked his talk as well, you know, because he was a practitioner. He was not just interested in collecting knowledge, but practicing wisdom. And he was controversial simply because he was like too much for his own times, so to speak.
Right.
So I'm glad because, because I really exposed myself at the beginning, you know, and I thought, what if his readings are like 25 or something, right? And it has actually never happened to me before that, you know, when I study, you know, intensely and so on and write things, but, you know, that actually somebody was like pretty much manifesting himself as much as it is possible, almost in a material form. And it's just, you know, having conversations, you know, like he was definitely there,
yes.
You know, when I was studying him.
But just know that you had, well, number one, you were studying his work, right?
So connected.
So you're tuning in to that. Yeah. And then at the same time, your own frequency, yes, it allowed you to connect.
Yeah, I hope so. But I mean, this was just an amazing experience for me that, and it was very authentic. I know that I was not delusional. I didn't seek this experience. You know, I didn't have an experience like that before. And it was a very positive experience, you know, we just like a friend showing up and, you know, okay, so let's look into this. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yes, that might be the new book. All right.
Maybe, yeah.
The next one is the Kula Ritual.
Yeah, the Kula Ritual is the chapter 29 of Tantra Loka, which is the most controversial chapter of, you know, Tantra Loka, which is written by actually Abhinava Gupta. And there he's looking into sexual rituals. And it is extremely, I studied it with somebody who translated it from Sanskrit, and it still was almost impossible to understand simply because it is written in a coded language, because not everyone, and this is what perhaps sometimes, you know, Western practitioners would disagree, you know, was supposed to understand it. But it could be also for different reasons, because Eros is very powerful, you know, and can be used and misused. Also, most society, especially at that time, which was very, especially for Brahmins, you had to be very ascetic, you know, you have to follow certain rules, you know, you shouldn't eat meat or drink wine, or, you know, you just only have sex for procreation, and suddenly there's a, you know, sexual ritual. So this ritual was actually about breaking all the rules, you know, so, and how is it possible to reach enlightenment or expansion of consciousness by breaking societal rules in many ways, right? But at the same time, with complete with complete respect for your partner, for your sexual partner. So because this is such a difficult text, in my own book, you know, I just kind of modernize, you know, paraphrase, you know, so I was true to the content, but paraphrase it. So it's basically, you know, after the sexual ritual, man says, I worship you, O goddess, as a representation of Shakti, you know, and she worships him as Shiva, you know, so it's very beautiful. So originally it feels like it is very, well, radical, right? Because it's not only a sexual ritual, but it uses wine and menstrual blood and, you know, and so on. But then the love making is very beautiful, you know, saying mantras and anointing each other's organs with fragrant oils and worshiping. I worship you as Shiva, I worship you as Shakti, as the divine feminine, divine masculine. So this is the Kula ritual, but it was considered and continues to be very scandalous ritual, and and it's very difficult to know what was actually going on because of the issues with translation and the encoded language.
Mm-hmm. So somewhat a practice of detachment, right?
It was also detachment. So when I thank you for reminding me of this, because one issue that I had about it when I studied with other scholars in private meetings, right? So it was secretive even then, you know, because people don't want to come up, you know, when they study this. And I wrote it in my book that, you know, what the problem was that they used, because they're Brahmins, right? So they're Brahmins, they're highest caste. So they used the beautiful young women from the village, you know, for the ritual, right? Because it's a kind of detachment. So you shouldn't do it with your wife. You shouldn't do it with your partner, so to speak, because it creates emotional attachment, and then it takes it away from the focusing on expansion of consciousness, you know? So it shouldn't be emotional attachment. It's more about reaching out to divine consciousness without getting involved into with the romantic stuff. And then the women were discarded. So my question was like, what happened to the women? What if they got pregnant or got a sexual disease and so on? And so I asked the translator, the Sanskrit scholar, who is also a Catholic priest. He said, and he has a PhD in it and wrote a book about it. He said, and I was also there with a Buddhist monk, right? So it was us, Buddhist monk, a Hindu Swami, the Catholic priest who is a Sanskrit scholar who translated Kula Ritual, and myself, who were meeting weekly, a year and a half. And they said, oh, we don't know. I said, so what happened to the women? And I said, we don't know.
But so the translation, would you say that was in the translation, the ritual itself that he translated?
Yeah, so the ritual itself is translated, but it's full of like mysterious mantras, or just says, say this mantra, but nobody knows what this mantra is. You know, when you turn to the east and so on. But for example, other things are kind of, you can figure out, you know, that there are these beautiful women and they should have breasts like this bimba tree fruits, or, you know, and in ways, and, you know, and this is what we do. And by doing rituals, tantric rituals, and saying all kinds of mantras, and it's happening in a very beautiful environment, that rose petals are flowing, you know, and there are beautiful incense, and, you know, we massage each other's bodies with great respect, and it's a beautiful lovemaking. And for me, at the end also, there's this beautiful moment that I translated, paraphrase, but it's actually the tantric prayer at the end is, you know, when a woman says, after, you know, final lovemaking, it is when, you know, you reach the highest consciousness, you know, because you connect with the original sound of the universe. You know, it's very similar to like to this creation. And in some ways they worship women as the representations of original creation, so to speak, but not, so they worship the divine feminine, but not women. Okay, so this is what I'm saying, because women were disposed of. But
that is literally written in there, that women were disposed of. So this is interesting reading. And
I mean, like, I don't know, disposed of. No, it's not in the reading. It is what this says. It was my question. They said, I don't know. So they don't know what happened to the women, okay? Because it's not in the text.
But that's how they were being treated back then during those times, right?
Yeah. So in the text, it doesn't say what happened to the women. I just said, okay, so they invited these women, what happened to them? And the scholars told me, and the Buddhist monk and so on told me, oh, we don't know what happened to these women. So I had an issue, but it's not in the text. In the text, is just no mention of it at all. It's just, this is what happens, and this is how the ritual ends, and this is how you reach divine consciousness.
But was it, you think, somewhat metaphorically described, or it were actual events that took place, literally?
We actually don't know if it was literal or not, because it is so encoded.
Okay,
right?
So here's the key. So it's encoded text. So
it is definitely encoded. It's like hermeneutic text, like when you read Hermes phrase, great, you just guess halfway through, right? So we don't know.
My feeling is, my feeling is that it's sort of like it was a poetic expression of what they wanted to accomplish in order to experience a high level of consciousness, right?
Yeah, it was a poetic expression, and also saying, like, we hear yourself from societal rules, so it's not like you can experience this with someone else, you know what I mean? Just because Brahmins, for example, married for different reasons, right? Like it was arranged marriage and so on. So it was for different reasons. So this maybe was, so it's definitely poetic, encodic, and hermeneutic. And in this, I mean, like, it was not supposed to be known. I just know that when I read it, once the scholar translated, I saw the poetry of it. That's why I included, the prayers in my book, paraphrased, because you could see genuine respect and love to each other, the beautiful lovemaking and the beautiful prayer, and just honoring eros. But I'm just telling you also how it was criticized, right? Because it was considered scandalous, right?
Right, yes. And of letting go of detachments or attachments, able to detach fully, and really is how we release resistance, and that's how we experience higher level of consciousness. Whatever helps us to get there. It could be meditation, going for walks, riding a bike, horseback riding, reading, writing, dancing.
That's right. And this is what they said. They said that do not focus on, being with this partner. Focus on what you both want to achieve. You know what I mean? Which is expansion of consciousness. And very often with a guru, like, for example, Abhinava Gupta, who's considered this as well, he would also decide who is ready for this. So it wasn't like anybody could jump in, like these two are ready to experience it, so instead of going for some kind of romantic high, if they are paired, they can achieve expansion of consciousness through this ritual.
Right, makes total sense. Yes.
All right, we'll give you the numbers.
Letting go with a common goal, which was to achieve that ultimate experience. Now, the Kula Ritual, overall frequency 500.
I am so happy about that.
That's wonderful. Impact on human energy field 400. Yes. Impact on human body 500.
Yes.
So it makes total sense based on what you were describing, right? Alignment with divine purpose 100%. Alignment with its mission 100% as well.
Yay.
All right. Next one is Lakshmanjoo.
Lakhsmanjoo. And Jasmine, I just last word about the Kula Ritual. I'm really happy about these results, because very often, and we probably will move on to this was criticized by how it was later used by modern gurus, so because the text is difficult to understand and they just appropriate it for their own reasons, right? But I think that knowing that Abhinava Gupta wrote it, you know, it would have a higher purpose, you know, and that it was only the chosen disciples that were meant to participate. Yes.
And it matches his frequency, 500. So absolutely makes sense that somebody with that frequency wrote it.
I'm very happy about that. Thank you.
All right. Lakhsmanjoo.
Lakshmanjoo is a very interesting person. He died in the 20th century. He's a 20th century scholar, and I think he was most popular during around the 1980s, because what happened there, that he actually revived the tradition of Abhinavagupta. So he somehow connected with Abhinavagupta, with his teachings, and he revived them, because Abhinavagupta was largely forgotten. It's 10th century, right, that he lived. And Lakshmanjoo rediscovered his teachings, and he was like Abhinavagupta. He was considered that he was not only a scholar, but also a yogi. So at least from what we know, I don't know what the readings will say, that he was taught to walk his talk, you know, but he is mostly known for reviving Abhinavagupta's teachings, and many Western scholars later cued into him, you know, to his translations and so on, because he started to, brought it back to our attention, you know, great philosophical works, especially of spiritual significance, are often forgotten, right? And he just basically rediscovered us, the teachings of Abhinavagupta for us. So I'm not sure what his frequency is, and he was frequented by many other gurus, such as, like, for example, Muktananda and so on, some famous Indian gurus from the time, and Tibetan teachers as well, famous lamas, because he revived the teachings. So definitely a great scholar, but they say he also practiced his teachings. So let's see what the readings say.
So he incarnated at the frequency of 350, born at the frequency of 100. His overall frequency was 350. Health, he viewed health as body, mind, and soul connection. He viewed it through the lens of 400. It's a very analytical approach. Finances, 250. Creativity, 400. Relationships, 350. Personal growth, 500. So that was his guiding light. Philanthropy, 350. Intuition, 350. And the four aspects of intuition, the clairaudience, 350. Clairsentience, 400. Clairvoyance and claircognizance, both 350. IQ, 250. EQ, 250, so quite balanced there. SQ, 400. So again, this 400 usually lets us know that someone who's, you know, with that frequency is very comfortable speaking to large groups of people. And the AQ, adversity quotient, 200. He enjoyed his role 95% of the time. In the ego, 70%. And out of that, 77% inferior. In the now, 92%. Integrity, 100%. Integrity to himself and to others, 100%. So yes. Self-awareness and clarity, 100%. Alignment with divine purpose and personal purpose, 100%. So he was a master of that frequency. Compassion, 100%, and empathy, 100%.
That's wonderful, and it actually confirms what I felt about him and read about him, you know, that, and it doesn't surprise me that he had a little bit of an inferior ego, because he was in awe of Abhinavagupta. So he basically like served his teachings, you know. Abhinavagupta was just this amazing being who just, you know, compiled all of his teachings, when Lakshmanjoo was like honoring Abhinavagupta. Right. So in this way, inferior maybe in a sense that, you know, it's not about me, right? It just, I want to bring back the teachings of this great being called Abhinavagupta.
We do have one surprise. I know you didn't ask us to do it, but we actually read the frequency of Bhagavad Gita in the Light of Kashmir Shaivism, and the frequency of that writing is 500.
Yes.
Impact on human perspective is 500. Impact on human energy field, 500. Alignment with divine purpose is 100%, and alignment with its mission, 100%. Integrity of the content is 100%, and transparency is 100%.
Thank you. I love Bhagavad Gita. And in fact, when I moved away from, I was born Catholic, you know, and I moved away for a while from Christianity, although now I also, you know, read Gnostic Gospels and so on. Before I started to study Tantric teachings, I found Bhagavad Gita, and it gave me clarity and knowledge that I couldn't find in Western traditions personally. That's a personal view, you know, so I think it is a work of great wisdom, you know, so I used to read from Bhagavad Gita daily, every morning. So.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
The next on the list is the creator of Neo-Tantra, Arthur Avalon, also known as Sir George Woodroffe.
Yeah, he's an interesting person, you know, because he's this Englishman born to privilege who lived in Indian Raj, you know, so in British-controlled India. And he comes from a family of lawyers, and I think he was also like one in a Supreme Court in India, you know, British Supreme Court in India and so on. And apparently at least this is the kind of common story, that he got interested in Tantra because at some point he was doing some, you know, doing his job as a judge, and he couldn't say a word, you know, he had no clarity, and some Indian cleric told him, you know, because there's this Tantrika, you know, which is a practitioner of Tantra outside, and he was paid to do some evil mantras, you know, so you cannot do, you know, proper consideration here because to cloud your mind, you know, so they sent somebody to chase the Tantrika away, and then he immediately, you know, got his clarity back. So he started to be interested in this, in these teachings. He says, oh, you know, something mysterious is going on here, and he actually got himself a guru and started to learn Sanskrit properly with great devotion, listen to his guru, learn Sanskrit, learn how to pronounce it properly, and translated many tantric works, including he pretty much introduced Kundalini energy to the West, you know, by translating tantric works. And So in this, you know, as a translator from Sanskrit, you know, great accomplishment. And it's interesting that he took this name Arthur Avalon because there is a story also that he was joined, you know, some kind of Celtic hermeneutic organization, you know, like some esoteric teachings as well, which somehow run parallel to Tantra, but I'm not familiar with, you know, Celtic esoteric teachings. So that's why, and also he chose the name Arthur Avalon because, you know, he had this high position in British government in India, and he didn't want to be known as also somebody who translates esoteric works of Tantra, right? So that was his kind of like living a little bit of a double life. Right. So, and he died, if I remember correctly, he died in 1936 in France. Right? And educated in Oxford, by the way, but, you know, spent most of his time in India.
Interesting.
Are you revealing it?
It seems like it, based on your song. Overall frequency 125. Incarnated at the same frequency, 125, was born at the frequency of 50, viewed health through the lens of 125, finances 55, creativity 125, relationships 50, personal growth 125, philanthropy 55, intuition 125, and with an intuition, clairaudience, clairsentience, clairvoyance, and claircognizance at 125. Under IQ, 310, EQ, 175, SQ, 500, AQ, 50, in the joy, 98%, in the ego, 96%, and 96% of that was the superior version of the ego.
Of course, he was a British in India, right? So he was the ruler, right? So
using his charm.
In the now, 95%, integrity, 77%, integrity to self, 94%, integrity to others, 74%, self-awareness, 96%, clarity, 94%, alignment with divine purpose, 93%, alignment with personal purpose, 99%, compassion, 88%, and empathy, 90%.
Yeah, so that's very interesting for me. I have no attachment to him, you know, so because I just know that he did some good service, you know, but translating some works, you know, and he did put lots of effort into learning proper Sanskrit, which is, this is credit to him, because apparently his Sanskrit became so good that, you know, it was better than Indian scholars, you know, because he was just so precise about pronunciation. And I did some Sanskrit courses a long time ago, and it's very difficult because, like, you have to breathe differently with different syllables and so on. So, you know, he really put an effort to it. Yeah. But I think his interest is mostly intellectual.
His divine alignment is pretty high. So it also shows that he actually was on his path. He was walking his path.
That's
so
good
makes sense. Yeah. Neo-Tantra.
Neo-Tantra. So this is now I'll get into trouble, whatever I say. Right? Because Neo-Tantra is basically, it's very complex, because it's basically how Tantra was being introduced to the West. And some people, so I just out of curiosity went to Wikipedia, it immediately says, oh, misguided Western, you know, take on Tantra. But I'm not so sure about that, because, but let's talk about it. So once, you know, Arthur Avalon, you know, introduced it, you know, at least Sanskrit works and so on. And in the 60s and 70s, especially, lots of people went to India, and there were lots of translations and so on. And also Osho happened, or Rajneesh happened at that time, who was, as we know, he was first a professor of philosophy at the university, and then, you know, he became this great controversial guru, and he created, or what maybe didn't create it, but from his teachings came many well-known tantric teachers in the West. For example, one of them is Margot Anand, who is a French woman who wrote many books. You know, I think she's an Oshovite, if I'm correct, and so on. So very often Tantra is being, Neo-Tantra is being criticized as a Western take on Tantra, which didn't take into consideration all aspects of Tantra and focuses only on sexual aspects of Tantra, when sex is only one of the aspects of Tantra. So it's basically, Tantra is about reaching divine consciousness, and sexuality is only one of many ways we can do it. And also Tantra was, according to some, appropriated by some tantric, neo-tantric teachers as something that is done between the couples. You know, when, for example, in Kula Ritual, it was for chosen disciples, right, who are ready for experience of expanded consciousness. And some critics of Neo-Tantra say that this is like tense sometimes on how to improve sex life of couples, when this is not about that, right? So this is what the criticism says. On the other hand, I think Neo-Tantra did lots of good things in the West, because introduced the concept of sacred sexuality, which means, you know, more conscious attitude towards sexuality, and the idea that sexuality can be also spiritual. So that's a very, very difficult topic, Neo-Tantra, because everybody likes to dump on it, you know, and when you, as I said, and so on. But I think it actually introduced many good things as well, again, to Westerners. And very often critics of Neo-Tantra are, and this is what I often meet in scholarship, that say, oh, that sharing knowledge with Westerners is not a good thing. It has to be done within particular cultural context, which means Indian or Tibetan context, which I personally do not agree with this. At the same time, it was probably misappropriated by some tantric teachers into something that, you know, let's just enjoy sex on a completely different level. So, you know, it's just such a broad term that, yeah.
I agree with your disagreement.
Okay.
Right, because as you mentioned earlier, the whole idea is to practice detachment, right? How can we do that when we're limited to culture, belief system?
That's right. That's right.
Established by society, right? Yes. So Neo-Tantra, overall frequency, 125.
I would agree.
Impact on human energy field, 125. Impact on human body, 55. Aligning with divine purpose, 77%. Aligning with its mission, 100%. And with this doesn't mean that everyone that practices it is going to be out of alignment with divine purpose, right? But overall, at the core of the practice as of how it's been utilized, I will say, or applied, is out of alignment as is now, right?
So there's definitely something to go back in the sacred ancient scriptures to decode.
Information gets manipulated often, especially when it comes from the east to the west, and it gets manipulated for what is it called? It gets commercialized.
Commercialized, yeah, and this is what I agree. So, but I also agree with general frequency, which is 125, as you said, because it's kind of not enoughness in the West, you know. So, like how, you know, because we took sexuality to the limit in the wrong direction, right? So when some people started to look into, you know, there is another like direction, it could be spiritual, but stopped at certain level. And very often, because when I started to be interested in it, you know, I was a lot in the circles, I met lots of people who took it like, oh, so now we can have sex with, you know, like anybody, you know, as long, you know, as we are not attached. You know, so basically having sex and taking no responsibility in any way and not necessarily focus on high consciousness, you know, only if we use some, you know, fragrant oils, you know, that's Tantra and do some breathing, but this is not how it is. That's why, you know, I spent the time, you know, reading, you know, the Kula Ritual, the chapter 29 for a year and a half, you know, one chapter. And to know to what is it really about. And it is not what I observe by large in the West. Having said so, there are probably some great teachers who say, look, you know, like this is not just about this, you know, this is not just, this is, so some people I think confuse Kama Sutra with Tantra. You know, Kama Sutra is one thing, you know, and Tantra is another thing. Right, it's completely different purpose, right? One is pleasure seeking, and which is nothing wrong with it, and another one is expansion of consciousness. So yeah, I would say we have to probably go back to the original texts.
The important fact that you mentioned earlier is that the one who created the Tantric movement originally, I can't recall his name.
Abhinava Gupta, yeah.
Yes, that you said that he was very adamant about bringing two people that they were in a way in alignment and ready to share themselves without any labels, any attachments, right?
Right,
so
that's right.
You had to go through a process in order to peel those labels off of you and have this pure connection. Huh?
Correct, and that's why, you know, the mantras, you know, they are not just to be repeated like so you can get through them and, you know, and get to the sex part. It is to elevate your consciousness, you know, so okay, it reminds you why you are here, right? What this ritual is about, right? So to elevate your consciousness to a particular level. Having said so, tantric experiences sometimes by what I called, using Western terminology, act of grace, can be spontaneous. You know, so you can have a spontaneous, like it is possible, but now you have to work your way towards it. You know, now you have to do this. So you're given. I had an experience like that, but I spent a year and a half studying it, and after studying it, I had an experience. You know, so I think it was. And there are certain criteria you have to fulfill, and I spontaneously at this moment fulfilled them, and I was like filled with the teachings and with all the teachings. You know, I just did my academic job so I can pay my bills and I can study, you know, this work, and I had developed relationship with Abhinava Gupta, right, and so on, when he was helping me to understand. And then I had a spontaneous experience of that, which I don't know how to repeat. But I was almost by an act of grace giving this cosmic vision through a tantric experience. And it was like a one-off, right? So so that's possible too, but I must say I was also a committed initiate, so to speak, at that time, right?
So somewhat is inverted. What comes to me based on what we are sharing is that in the West, the process is backwards, is beginning at the end, and
That's
instead of right, and
it's a shortcut. It's like a shortcut, you know,
Yeah.
like a shortcut to this and that, yeah. And then
Spiritual
this is what
bypass.
it is. However, I would like to say that the intention and aspiration, maybe not intention, aspiration of Neo-Tantra is good, you know, because people feel that there is more, there's this great power to eros that can be liberating rather than, you know, some sex toys and you know, lots of excitement and sometimes lots of darkness, because eventually excitement will take you there, right, if you don't know other path. So the aspiration for something grander, you know, in eros is appropriate. Except that, you know, in a typical Western way, we just want to like, okay, that's a quick way, right? So, okay, so when I wanted once to publish a paper on this, I was immediately said, oh, this is very interesting, but can you tell our readers what they actually have to do with our hands and so on? I thought, okay, I'm not going there, you know, like, because it's actually not about that at all. Right. You know what I mean? Like they just wanted tricks. They wanted sex tricks, basically. And there are no sex tricks.
Right.
In Tantra. So I thought, okay, so I'll just drop that right here, right? And I'm not, it's just...
Most people are looking for a drive-through experience.
That's right, yeah.
Fast food experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
The hacks, you know, give me 1, 2, 3.
That's right.
No spiritual bypass.
7 ways to ecstatic Tantra, right?
Right.
That would get published for sure. With practical gestures. And
there you go. All right, last one on the list. And I'm sure people will say, well, can you do more? So we'll figure out if we're going to do another episode on this. But the last on the list you've written down is Simon
the Magician, or Simon Magus, or Magus in English, which is the wise man, right? So because somebody in the comments says, so magician doesn't give him justice, and it's true, because magician is doing tricks, and magi or magus is, you know, the wise man who a little bit like has access to higher reality, you know, has higher wisdom. And so he's a very controversial figure, and we cannot speak about Tantra without his partner Helen of Tyre, which we discussed in Other Goddesses, was considered the representation or incarnation of Goddess Sophia, Goddess of Wisdom. And he is well known and kind of removed almost from the scriptures, although he is present in the scriptures, because he's mentioned as Simon the Magician as an alternative almost to Jesus, right? So he's like portrayed in this way. However, like Jesus and Mary Magdalene, as you spoke before, are portrayed in this in modern also way, but also in the scriptures, if we forgot the prostitute part, you know, as they say, the Beatles, as my friend once said, Simon the Magician and Helen of Tyre were like the Rolling Stones, which means they were a more colorful version of that, right? So some people say that perhaps it was the same couple, but represented in 2 different ways. And we know that Simon the Magician and Helen of Tyre did practice sacred sexuality, or, you know, sexuality for expansion of consciousness. However, their relationship was kind of, again, a reverse of what we know of relationship with Jesus and Mary Magdalene, because it is the Helen of Tyre that possesses the higher wisdom, and he's kind of embedding this wisdom in human beings. He's like almost like the conduit, the translator of that wisdom. And it is quite interesting, because although he was vilified by many church fathers and so on, they couldn't forget about him. You know, they just, and that Simon, you know, will he ever go away? You know, why do we have to deal with him? And for example, some scholars argue, and I'm talking about like proper scholarship now, right, that he was the Good Samaritan also, because we know he was Samaritan. So maybe he was the Good Samaritan from the Bible as well. Right. So then it poses like this different picture of him, because, you know, he was the man of good works, not only of great wisdom, right? Because he's doing the same good job that Jesus did. And that's why other scholars argue, Gnostic scholars, that he may be actually a more bold version of Jesus, right? More version of Jesus, and Mary Magdalene is like Helen of Tyre. And a most recent piece of scholarship that I came across is, maybe some of your listeners heard about Carl Jung, a Swiss psychologist who was a student of Sigmund Freud, and he rebelled against Sigmund Freud because he thought, we have to look at human psyche from a spiritual point of view.
Or Carl Jung. Carl Jung?
Yeah. But I'm pronouncing in the German way, Jung, right? Or Jung, right? So Jung, Carl Jung. So at certain stage in his life, he was dissatisfied with his academic career. He says, I know I can be professor, but it doesn't lead to anywhere. And he started to spend most of his days going in deep meditation and going into psyche and analyzing his dreams and so on. And he said that at certain stage, a guide appeared in his consciousness, and he says he was a very colorful, flamboyant man, and I called him Philemon. I think he said, I called him Philemon, and he basically guided him through his psyche, human psyche, and gave him great knowledge, and then that's why later he wrote his great works, right? And especially Carl Jung was very deeply into Gnosticism. I gave lectures about it, so he was a pronounced Gnostic. And Simon the magician is kind of really revered by the Gnostics, as an interesting person. And recently when I attended to a lecture by my colleague Miguel Conner, he's found an information that in letter, I think 194, Carl Jung admits that the Philemon, the guide through human psyche, was Simon the magician, so this is like I thought, I have to say it in this show,
Wow.
He was actually the teacher, the kind of like Abhinavagupta was working with me. So in a way, kind of Philemon was working with Carl Jung, but on a much profound way, right? I'm not making any comparisons, I'm just making parallels. Right. And then in one of his private letters, Carl Jung admitted that it was Simon the Magus, that was basically giving him the teachings of, that made Carl Jung famous as having this very deep look into human psyche.
I'm getting major chills right now. You too?
Me too. So exciting. Actually, we did reveal Carl Jung and Freud 2 years ago in one of our episodes. And this is actually going to confirm everything that you just shared.
Oh, fantastic.
Including the fact that there are some scholars that are saying that it is the same couple. And we're going to confirm that. Absolutely.
They're being expressed in different styles, right?
Right. Yeah. But the frequencies are identical. Just so people understand, the frequency of Simon the magician is identical to the frequencies of
Jesus Christ,
of Emmanuel, or Yeshua, also known as Jesus Christ. Absolutely identical. And so, as in our previous episodes together with you, we've revealed the signature frequencies of Helen of Tyre, and we said that her frequency was identical to Mary Magdalene. And these are the beings we call the avatars that come here, that are fully integrated beings from other dimensions, right? The 13th dimension.
That's fantastic news, and it is really important news, because I always say that the divine consciousness and avatars manifest to us in a way we are capable of accepting them. And in a certain stage and age, the kind of a more polite version of them would be the only one that was acceptable, right? And even this was, diminished, making her into prostitute and so on, right? Mary Magdalene, which is not true. But, Gnostics were much more open-minded, and they were like, saying, no, this just doesn't make any sense, right? They thought, we think, Simon Magus may be the same person. They had this intuition, because there are just too many similarities, except that Simon Magus is more difficult to put it into a box. You know what I mean? Because he's like a full-blown, doesn't apologize for anything, he just does his good works, and so that doesn't surprise me, and that's very wonderful.
That's wonderful. Imagine nowadays where the frequency of the human collective is at 125. If an avatar were to, show up and reveal himself or herself, probably will be also discarded and mistreated.
Yeah, I can imagine PR people saying, yeah, what you're saying is great, but I don't think our audience is ready for this. So, like just put on the, different t-shirts or, and then, yeah. So this like later, maybe for some initiates, but now, give us like the very basic message. So yeah, I can see this happening just like it happened with Yeshua, and just like, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're one and the same person.
Yeah, definitely. It's amazing how their frequencies are exactly the same, and we didn't know anything about him. You brought him up, actually.
Yeah, because he's a fascinating, and also other scholars, and there's a scholarship behind it, say that for a short time there were some statues to Simon the magician, like to Son of God and so on, but then it was like dismantled very quickly because it was interfering with another version of the events, so to speak. Right? So there were actually, so definitely even historically there is something to it.
Right, because the church just wanted to portray Yeshua as the one and only Son of God, so needed to get rid of all the others.
That's right. Or they just wanted one version of him, right?
One version.
Definitely.
Yes. This is fun.
It is, yeah.
Spiritual investigation continues.
Investigation continues, and revelation, right? Like, and so on. And it's really, I just want to comment back about Dakinis. I feel great compassion for them. And as you said that at the beginning, no education, no opportunities, so, and if it comes for desire for betterment, within very difficult circumstances, they did the best they could, I guess. And they had access to what they had access to, right? And they work with it. So
exactly. There's no such thing as good or bad or negative or positive. We all experience life with our own style in whatever way.
So this is actually basic tantric teaching you just pronounced, because this is what the Tantrics say. There are social conventions and we have to obey them for the sake of morality, but on a certain level, good and evil, I know some people are going to get really angry, it's just a play of consciousness.
That's right.
It's just a play of consciousness. So so this is what they were saying, right? And then consciousness is just exploring itself in different versions.
Yes, but I feel that people will not be angry. They will be curious.
That's okay. We are just explorers. I'm not saying that I know great truths or anything. I just have my experiences and my research behind it, and a book. And this is what I know at this stage of my life. That's all I am saying, right? So
this is so much fun. I think it's beautiful to walk through life, question everything, be curious and open. And this is really for us, this is why the Vibrational Revelations has been such a gift. It's taken us to a place of truly having more compassion for the human experience and being in a state of awe of really what is possible and how we're all so unique and contributing to this beautiful tapestry of life, right? With our own unique signature frequencies and our personalities.
Exactly. So it's just, again, as Tantric say, it's all a play of consciousness and you play your own part, and at the end, and it was also later picked up by actually an Irish scholar in the 9th century called John Scotus Eriugena, who was very much Tantric, I don't know how, when he says at the end, and that's why he was pronounced heretic, because, the church couldn't accept it. At the end, we all go back to the source.
Exactly.
Good or bad, we all go back to the source. And people said, no, how the bad can go, there has to be hell, there has to be heaven. And he says, no. And this is what the Tantrics would say. And then just we all merge back with divine consciousness after playing our parts.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, often we hear that people want to destroy the darkness or destroy the evil, destroy everything that is the opposite of what they believe is good. And what they don't realize is that they're attempting to destroy God in a way.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I because I could go back to a goddess Kali here, but basically the story with goddess Kali, one of the teachings or mythological revelations is that she realized that the more she was fighting evil, the more she was helping it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then that's a very important, I think, lesson for our times.
Definitely.
You know, that it's not about fighting evil, right? It's about forgiveness and about moving on and focusing on light, not about fighting, you know, something.
Yes, definitely.
And with that, our show has come to conclusion. So thank you so much. We'll post all the links on how people can find your book. Everything will be posted right below. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you, as always, an immense pleasure and just fun, you know, just good to do something for fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.